Welcome Angie Hohenadel, our artist who has their work in the gallery. We've had them here for just about 2 months. And the show's called Little Whispered Moments.
Yes.
And yeah, I have loved this show. Just like every show we do here, it's always so exciting. And this one I think has been different in many, many ways from every other show we've ever done. And I'm excited to kind of talk through that with you guys. And of course, if there are questions along the way, we always keep these really informal, so feel free just to ask them. And no need for hands raised, just start speaking. But yeah, so Angie, thanks for joining us tonight. This is our second exhibition that we've had with Angie. The first one being when you had your illustrations for the children's book store. I was here, and that was a fantastic show. We had a great artist talk there too. And now we have so much of your work in here. And this show came together when we met during the summer, right? We met in your backyard and talked about what you could want to do for this show. And your idea was simply to make as much work as you absolutely could and then jam the walls with it. And
She accomplished it.
yeah, absolutely. And so that was all we needed for Angie, for us to be sold on the idea of it. Like, we know Angie really well. We love your work, and we know that you take everything that you do creatively really seriously. So we didn't need like any more selling on the idea of it. So we're like, yeah, that's gonna be great. And the timing of this show, I think, was really excellent too. We chose the holiday season with the idea that people, like, should they wish to purchase the work, can take it right off the wall and go home with it that night. It's something that we've never done in Curio before. Usually, our exhibitions, when work sells, we ask that it stay on the wall until the end of the exhibition, and then we contact everybody and they either come collect it or we ship it. So, when it came time to figure out what do we do with the empty hole, because inevitably, like, we knew that these works were going to sell, you had the idea to just put up a colorful square, and I think it's awesome. It's great to see how the exhibitions changed. Like, as more squares started to pop up, people were really connecting with the color choices, and we allowed the people who purchased the work to choose the color of the square that went into place, which was very fun. And I think probably one of the coolest things, Nicole and I both have noticed this, that when people were making their decision of what color to put up, they would look. They'd be like, well, what's over there? Oh, there's already a blue in there. We can't do another blue one. Or they would look and be like, oh, well, the piece underneath it is red, so let's go with this one. And it was really fun just to see people make that decision. And I'm really happy to see so many colorful squares. It's exciting. So, with the idea of the show being make as much as you possibly can.
Yes.
That's, I guess we can dive into the show there. So, when knowing you had about 6 months time, actually all this was created in 6 months time, right? Ish?
These were like January, February, March on this wall, which kind of led into those. So, yeah, 9 months.
Yeah, which I think is just crazy. It's a huge amount of work. So can you kind of talk us through your, I guess, ideation phase and what it was like to execute so much?
Yeah, so I, like, the starting point last January was me kind of like entering the new year with a realization that Posca markers were like holding paint, and I didn't have to like mix colors. I could like learn to mix colors with markers, which I had never really done before. So it was more of an exploration of a new material for me. So I started this little body of work down here from Instagram prompts, from like illustrators that I follow on Instagram, because I didn't have to think of an idea. So for me, my visual field and my envisioning and my imagination is just so big and so rich that if I just get a word, I'm like, all right, got it. But I sometimes need that to like get going. So that was like really exciting because it allowed me just like prompts to figure out the material a little bit. And then I often work sort of like I bounce back and forth with materials where I see so much I can do and how much color I can have. And then I start to think, well, what if I only allowed myself one marker on white? and what could I do then? Because I also really enjoy printmaking and like designing for printmaking, although I don't do a lot of it, which is kind of interesting. I teach it, but so that kind of led to these over here, which the marker process like really expedited things. And this is when Matt and Nicole and I all of a sudden, yes.
Oscar product placement moment.
Yeah, here's one of these. Oh, that's the one you guys have. The Broadkill Beach. That's this mother. So yeah, it just kind of like led to just this really kind of stripped down. I love squares. I like small things. And really, I just started to cut like a bunch of 8 by 8 inches pieces of paper, and just all summer and all fall, it was a lot of kind of just responding to what was happening in my life, or things I saw, things I thought were funny. And I really wanted to also not just a lot of work, but like really positive. I don't know, I felt like this year has brought me a lot of like, I don't know, like a lot more safety and comfort and joy than last year did. So it felt kind of right to like feed into that just like comfy, sweet spot on myself. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great observation that, and I like, just hearing you say that, it just made me think for a moment, like, how do I feel about last year too? And yeah, you're right, felt much more positive. It wasn't as unknown as it was when we were going through like the thick of the pandemic and everything that was going on with the world at the time. So last year I do think felt way more positive. But we started to see that in all aspects, you know, people back out on the streets, everybody excited to go to things again. I think conversations just turned lighter. People felt a little bit like they had a weight lifted off of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great to see, you know, that resonate in the studio as well.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool. And I didn't know that about the Instagram prompts for these
Yeah.
pieces. So, like, is that maybe where the titles came?
No.
No.
The cat ones were a cat Instagram prompt, clearly. And so like it was, I can't remember the name of the group. It was just like sort of a big conglomerate of illustrators. And so it was like cats and topiaries, cats and cactus. I mean, it's kind of like, I feel sad pointing it out, but like, that's like, as an artist, sometimes the sticking point is like, what do I want to do? And I mean, I tell my students this a lot, and I use this, and my husband and I talk about this, is like, you know, my students will say like, well, what do you do when you're in a creative rut? And I'm like, I just make art. Like, you kind of like just have to keep making, even if it's just marks or throwing paint or like cutting paper and like looking at the shapes you cut them into and moving them. So this was really comfortably like me just making art because I had nothing else in my mind. But and then there were these three were like a plant one. I can't remember. It was just like in the park and greenhouse and then succulents, I think. But yeah, it's like that's all I needed was just a little nudge, and then I was like, all right, now what can this material do? Which was really exciting. And I just had a bunch of paper, so these were all just like random pieces of paper I had hanging around. I just kind of went with the size I found in my shelf.
Good thing you know a guy who can make a custom frame.
Yeah, for sure.
And so you touched on something really, I think, great there just a moment ago, where you were talking about, you know, when you're confronted with, you don't know what to do, you just make. When you're executing this many pieces, was there a moment where the idea was just kind of like, oh man, like I've just done 48 of these, what's number 49 look like? Or was it just like a pretty good roll of like, all right, let's go with this one, let's go with this one, go with this one?
Honestly, it just kept getting easier. And I mean, Jeremy was like, all right, well, we have to stop because we can fit this many frames in the plywood. Because I had like a list of multiples of 3, and it was like, well, what's my goal? I'm like, well, I gotta get to that one. I gotta get to 45. And then I got to 54. But I just, like, I was waking up at like 4 in the morning excited to make art, and I would just like crawl over to my studio and I would draw for 2 hours and then go to school, and it felt like I had done like a 2-hour workout, and so my school days were better, like everything felt better. So yeah, a lot of this was just like the early morning hours before school, and then I don't know, I was just like hungry to make it, which was just really exciting. And I feel fortunate that like lots of funny things and fun things happened in this past year that led to like little narratives and kind of, I don't know, they're sort of like self-portrait in some ways, because a lot of them are just like pinpointed to moments from 2023.
I'd love to expand on that idea a little bit of just the narrative, and then because people, when they come in and look, they get so wrapped up in the story of the one piece, and then inevitably they start drawing connections across the show, or the one above it or below it to the side of it. They start, and then they ask, are these all connected? Like, do they all have something to do with each other? And I think that's, when people start to ask those kinds of questions, it's usually because the work is telling them something, that there's something more to this than just an image.
Right.
So are there any in particular that you would kind of just want to go through and be like, oh, that's what this one was about? Or like maybe that kind of pinpoint moment?
Well, some of them are like actual moments, like things that sort of happened. Well, like, I mean, I was in Key West, so there's chickens everywhere.
Where
it's like-
did the skateboard spider come from?
Well, and then there's those moments where I like hear a skateboard or see something, and then in my head, which is why my imagination's kind of like gets the best of me sometimes, where I'm just like, well, that'd be funny. And then I'm like, no, that'd be good. And then I just make it, and it's like, I make it a moment. So yeah, the skater guy, that was just, like we live right up the street from the Ignition skate shop, and so we hear skateboards come down the street a lot. And I think it was like in the summer, and I heard something, and just like thought about how many legs could be on a skateboard, and then, yeah. I also really like spiders, so yeah, that one, yeah, it didn't actually happen though.
Go back to Key West and
Oh, well, yeah, and then, I mean, this was just from Key West, like a chicken that I met in Key West, specifically. I don't know if you had a name. And then who knows, like, I don't remember the order of things, but like then the way my brain works is like, oh, I'm like a chicken and a bird and I like the texture. And then I'm like, well, what if there's a fancy royal bird with a big hat? And then that's sort of where it becomes like step outside of like reality, and I just make things up. But it's interesting because even the ones that are like just like really out of like my head and my imagination kind of exploring are all like, even like this one, we go to, we hike a lot, we like to like just look for mushrooms and find them or whatever. And then I also make jokes with my students all the time when they're like, oh, I have a good idea for this print. How about a mushroom? I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. No one's done that. Like literally all the time. That's all they want to do is like draw mushrooms. So it's just me like poking fun at teenagers because that's what's like trendy, you know. But I decided I needed to do a mushroom one just to handle that.
I'm partial to all the gummies.
Yeah, well, I just like gummies. Yeah. So there's like, yeah, and some, I mean, it's just like, I feel like there should be a bigger story, but sometimes it's just, I don't know, I enjoy being alone with myself and art supplies. Like I listen to podcasts, I listen to music, I have like a weird television show running that's like kind of non-related, and I just can get lost in that exploration.
So being alone with art supplies, so many people when they look at these works, they initially think that they're prints.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're always like, they're like, oh, like what it, like I don't see an edition number. Like, well, there's not. That's the drawing, and they're stunned by it because they're so crisp, they're so clean, and these are just people's descriptors for it. They're like, it's so precise, it's so flat, it's so opaque.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to the Posca a little bit. Like, what is it like going straight onto these pieces? Do you ever feel like the stakes are really high in some moments, or do you generally feel like, I've got it and I know what I'm up to?
I feel like when it comes to like a marker on a paper, something that's permanent, I become like really confident and kind of arrogant. Like I'm just like, I got this. I don't make mistakes. I generally like, if something happens, I just evolve within whatever happened. I do very loose drawings with a really light pencil, like just generally, like this one I might say, okay, the path is gonna be like kind of here, and I'll just like give a little like notion of where the lizard's gonna go. But then all of the texture, all of the invention, like I just slow down and it just happens. So, yeah.
As you're talking about that, I'm wondering, do you see the image in your head before you start? Because they're like really intricate and a lot of stuff going on. How do you, or are you making it up as you proceed?
I think a little bit of both.
Hmm.
Like I don't have like a clear image of how it's all gonna end, but I have like a general idea of what's gonna happen in like the whole picture. Like I can generally kind of see where everything's gonna go, but as far as like my decisions with what's gonna be like, you know, like blacked out in the negative space versus like the positive space, I kind of just like make that up as I go, and then sometimes that decision dictates what's happening beside it, which is very much like printmaking in some ways, because you like carve an area, you have to understand the white and the black, but yeah, it's very ill-planned in a lot of ways. It's like, I think my head just like, I was talking to someone about this the other day, starting to sort of understand my, you know, they talk about different intelligences or whatever. I'm just like, visually, I feel pretty comfortable. Comprehending reading, not so much. Like there's just things that, you know, we all do well, and this show helped me really understand and find comfort in the visual part of myself in so many ways.
Do you have
Trusted it a
a
lot.
place that you tend to start?
Oh, well, what did I realize? Because I'm right-handed, which I like start the opposite direction. I tend to start in like the bottom left corner. That is something I noticed with this show, because I was like, well, why did I do that? Because now I'm on it. Like, it's not like, that didn't really make sense. But yeah, I noticed that a lot with these, because it was also like the same piece of paper over and over again. So I was always dealing with the same size and like a single color. But yeah, I for some reason would start drawing in the bottom right corner.
On that note of same size, like single color and intuition drawing, did you find that you needed to put what you had already created out of your visual space, because the variety and the change, I mean, there's a couple of 3x3 grid, there's a 3x3 grid, but otherwise there's such stylistic differences. Did you achieve that by basically just filing away what you were creating?
No, I actually did the complete opposite. So as I was working, and I would kind of like, my husband Jeremy built me this, just like a little, you know, it's just like a 6-inch depth, like wall. There's just like 2 shelves, so I could just lean things on. So then as I was working and I would sort of start to make decisions of what I was going on, I would go through and like shuffle the ones I was looking at. So if I was on black and white ones, and when I did the 3x3s, I was like, okay, what are all the 3x3s I have here? And yeah, I was actually referencing back to them a lot, because I was in some ways always thinking about like what was it gonna look like when we got here. And I wanted there to be some balance of the amount of 3x3s, and I had an even spread of color in black and white. So I was always counting those. I just had like a little sheet I was like ticking off on. So, but yeah, I looked back at things a lot, or sometimes I would just sit with them and not do anything, just like listen to a terrible podcast or something, and just stare at them and think about what was gonna happen next.
I just remember seeing that photo you posted of your studio, and there were just like markers and just, like a little tiny, like you looked like you put your arms in and went like that, and then just put your piece down. 'Cause I do the same thing.
You do?
Oh yeah,
Really?
I just recently cleaned my studio. Oh no, I'm not. I just recently cleaned my studio, and it was like stressing me out. It was actually keeping me away from going up there, because I was like, this is too much. But then I was like, I just have to clean it. But yeah, I can definitely be like, just get your arms in, spread it all out. Okay, now I can work here, and this is fine.
That's what I was doing. Like the Poscas would start to creep in, and then I would come in, and if I was just like, I didn't want to like think about cleaning, I would just like go like this and just push them back.
Yeah.
Like I had just enough space for 8x8 inches.
Pull those
and
away
it was
and work again.
Yeah, and then it does reach a point where sometimes I start to like have scraps, or I'm like whatever. I don't even like use the trash can. Just throw it on the floor, and then.
Do you always make that noise?
Yeah. Always.
You should
so,
draw
yeah.
that. You should draw that.
I should. That's next.
I actually think the next name for your future exhibition should be A Chicken I Met.
Yeah.
Maybe that's another children's book.
Your last exhibition, where you were illustrating a book, you were collaborating with somebody, and I assume there was some kind of deadline.
Mhm.
Was that much more challenging than just kind of moving ahead with your own ideas and not being, you know?
Yeah, I think
walled in?
so.
Yeah.
I think having that, like, you know, when you're partnering with somebody and like illustrating a kid's book, it's like I needed to feel like there was like affirmation from Hillary that I was like doing okay. And the first one we did together, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, the first like one I drew out, I remember like then reading about the sizes and the proportions. I was like, oh, got that wrong. I just like made it up. I was like, well, I can paint. So yeah, there were like a lot more kind of, I don't know, just like controls around it. So this was a lot more fun in some ways and freeing. Yeah.
Are there any that are not fun or freeing?
These?
Yeah. It's
I
also
mean,
tough
I
enough
feel
to
like
think
there's-
about the ones that aren't here anymore, too.
Right. Yeah, there's some that like they're not all just like happy and joyful. Some of them are a little bit like lonely and kind of sad, or
Like Here For You, I always think of that one as being kind of a,
the umbrella guy.
no, the one with the cloud that it's just
Yeah,
on
yeah, for sure.
But in a way, it's nice because that little plant all by itself needs water, and that cloud recognized it. But there's something about that one.
Yeah, there's
that hits
definitely
me in a
some
certain way.
like the beat one is
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like kind of braided. It's just kind of the idea that it's like, you know, sometimes you just feel so like wrapped up with other things.
Were any mammals hurt during it? I know the fish had a problem because, like that,
No.
the hedgehog or the porcupine, or was that it
Nope,
stressful?
Nope, everybody's pretty happy. I like animals, clearly. But yeah, I think some of them kind of were fed off of some, you know, just other moments that aren't super joyful. I like ski nobles.
Angie, are there any that didn't make it onto the wall?
Well, there's one that got glued to a piece of wood that's behind another one. I did another potato one and didn't work out, so I had it in completion. And I don't know if it's behind the other potato one. I can't remember at this point.
You mean Tater's gonna tape?
Yeah. Yes. So I did another one before that, and it wasn't very
I
good.
mean, there are two.
And then there's Loaded right next to it.
Yeah. Potatoes. But other than that, one that kind of just like, I think like a Posca just like exploded to the point of like not being able to bring it back. But not really. Nope, they all made it onto the wall. Yeah.
Very cool. And, I'd like to bring our attention back to these
Okay.
behind us. I feel like they're in many ways they're a pretty big departure because they're like the sizes are different. They seem like the intricacies of them are, I suppose, more laborious behind them. And when people read alcohol and acrylic markers on watercolor paper, they always wonder what alcohol means.
Yeah, they
So
thought
then
I was
I-
just drinking wine.
Well, so then I ended up like explaining, oh, we had alcohol markers, and then I'm like, all right, oh, that's cool. But then they, you know, they always have a lot of questions about like the organization in which that you're building the pieces. Can you take us through a
Yeah.
session?
The alcohol markers were kind of like, I don't love them, honestly. So, I mean, I think it was me just kind of starting to like play with markers as a material. And they kind of like, they're a little bit more like, you know, thin, so it's sort of watercolory. I didn't really have great ones. So honestly, it was more of the sort of like base for some of the colors, but really it's just mostly Posca markers. I was starting to realize like the alcohol markers like would sort of affect the lighter colors of the Posca markers when I'd lay them on top. And then I would just get mad and then put more on top, and then it would get like really dark, and then I'd have to like, this one in particular, I just kept like trying to like bring back light to it because it just got so dark after a while. So, but yeah, the alcohol markers are kind of just like the starting point. And if you look real close, you can see a little bit of a difference in like transparency versus opacity in the markers. But yeah, these were definitely more laborious. I think these two. I mean, this is like a lot of hours. I also like really, and I think that like maybe I mentioned this at the last artist talk, I was pretty obsessed with like Where's Waldo growing up. And so like this one in particular, and this one in particular, like I love looking at like little things and tiny things. So there's lots of like teeny tiny little hidden things in this one. This is probably the most like kind of, I'd say, relationship portrait of like Jeremy and I. It's just like all the things we like.
Epic day date.
Yes.
Yeah. And do those stories ever kind of unfold as you're making them, or do you find yourself like getting more into your own story as you're working on them, or like are you just kind of like pump the brakes between like going too far or just enough?
No, it definitely, like, as I work, I mean, this one, both of these in particular, like, as I was working, I was like, oh, well, that would be funny if the pool, like, the cloud hit the tarp and it fed into the pool where the, you know, where we were hanging out drinking beer, and I think that's a water bottle, so we stayed hydrated in the hot weather, and just like, that, all of that's just kind of invented as I go. So that's where just like some loose ideas of where sort of the, you know, horizon line's gonna be and sort of where the clouds are gonna be, and then everything else just kind of like comes as I start to make it. I don't have like a laundry list of my goals with it. For some of these, as I would start to work on them, I would get ideas, so I would write something down so I wouldn't forget it, but yeah.
I love the storytelling quality of them, and you know, like as you just said, you were so into Where's Waldo. I was super into I Spy, like the Walter Wood books. I always thought those were phenomenal. So just that kind of like what can I find in this? And even just you saying like, oh yeah, the rain was filling up the tarp, which can fill up the pool. I didn't pick up on it, and I've been living with them for almost 2 months.
There's a little poncho in the wine bottle.
Little Poncho on the wine
That's
bottle.
our dog.
Yeah. Because of Poncho, everybody loves, oh, now I'm blanking on the name, which is, so, quick aside, sometimes it takes me a while to remember the titles of the works in the exhibition. With Angie's, I was like committing them to memory so fast. I was like, oh yeah, this one. And I thought that was really good because there's so many, I don't know how I was able to retain them so quickly, but a lot of them I do.
I like naming
They're
things.
great descriptors.
Yeah, they really are, and that's such a great point.
And I think that one's called Care and Support.
Yes. When people recognize that it's a groundhog like holding up the, or creating the fourth leg of the dog, and they're like, oh wow, and then it makes them think of their tripods, and I was like, oh yes, that's Poncho, he's a very famous dog.
That's like that one, and then there's one that sold, the acorn one, or two like children book ideas I have. So I have the idea with,
If I had an acorn.
yeah, if I
That's
had an acorn.
fine.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So yeah, the one is like Poncho going through and trying to like find ways to replace his leg, and then like, you know, the typical like lesson at the end is like he's fine the way he is. But I just picture all these like animals offering things and then finding things and building a leg for himself. And then the other ones, if I had an acorn, is I just like the little acorn hats, and like, if you had an acorn, what would you do with it?
There was a trio that is completely missing now, but like when we were putting together the exhibition, Nicole and I were kind of making narratives for ourselves, or telling like little short stories with them. And so the top one, it was the blue, yellow, and green one, that column. First one was Bob, which is a house in Mount Gretna, right? Like I didn't know this, but is it all the homes, or a majority of the homes in Mount Gretna are named?
They're all named, right? Oh, yeah.
So that was pretty cool. I didn't know that. So, but like seeing Bob at the top, and then the second one was called Night Ninja, which was a cat in a doorway, and the shadow of the cat turned into a heart, but it was this really long black shadow. And then the one underneath that,
Bugs in bed.
it was, Bugs in Bed, and it was another one of the kind of multi-panel pieces where it was just like, you know, you two and a dog, or like other animals taking up space in the bed, and like the shifting, and like how animals inevitably end up taking all the space, and you're left with like nothing. But the narrative of that whole thing I thought was really great, where I was like, okay, so Bob is the house that's protecting everybody inside. The Night Ninja is the cat that's keeping watch over the people that are sleeping in that bed, but then also like, great, like there's no room for me there, so I guess I'll just like scowl at you from the door. Our cat does that. Like you'll just look over and he'll be staring at you from the doorway, and you almost have to invite him in like a vampire.
That was kind of like a fun aside when you guys asked if I wanted to like have a hand in like hanging. I was like, no, not at all. Like I just want to drop off the art and then see it up. And it was kind of exciting how they decided to hang it because I hadn't really considered how it would all go together other than just 3 rows. But yeah, I could tell that there were like little combinations that you guys saw similarities in.
Well, I think in the installation of a show, it's our opportunity to kind of bring ourselves to it a little bit. Like we trusted you to make a fantastic show, which you did. But then I think there needs to be an equal amount of trust that we're going to do as best we can to display the work in a way that really emphasizes its importance rather than just like makes it feel haphazard or just quickly put together. So Nicole and I spending that time like really thinking about these columns, and I actually think it was Nicole who decided that we should flip each one, right? Like have the black column and then the color column. And
Yeah, we weren't sure how we wanted to handle it, knowing that it was an even amount. We're like, how do we make this work?
Yeah.
Do
we considered
alternate?
Yeah, we considered splitting them and keeping them each off to the side, but then just a funny thing about this space is that, you know, we have this door that most people don't even recognize as being there.
I thought it was a piece of art.
Yeah.
That's my best work.
But we have this little break in the space. So keeping all like the black and white ones to this side would have still bled over into the bigger wall. So that didn't feel right. Just having like 2 rows of black ones and then the color ones started. So it just made sense to alternate them. And we really had a lot of fun putting that together. And then this back wall is always really fun too. This is kind of like just ours. We look at this wall as like a feature wall where we can really do something that is different from the other 2 walls, where we can either have fun with the exhibition, or if there's like a statement piece, it always kind of finds its way back here because it's the first thing you see when you enter the space. So we really had a good time putting this one together. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys have any questions?
I don't know you, I'm sorry. You said you're a teacher? Where do you,
I teach at Warwick High School.
and so you teach art?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I'm in my 16th year.
Oh, wow,
Teaching
okay.
9 to 12.
And you said that, the Posca markers were new for you. What did you used to, like, what was your primary medium?
So I typically would use watercolor or gouache paint, and sometimes like India ink. When I've done kind of I've done series of just black and white works before, and I've always used like a brush and ink. And so this just kind of gave me a little bit of leeway. And I did use a little bit of India ink for some of the black ones, but yeah, mostly just watercolor and gouache. Yeah.
Angie,
Yeah.
what's your creative life been like after you finish this
It's like
series?
sad. I don't know. I haven't really done much, like in the studio. I had like 2 commissions before Christmas that I got out, and then just kind of like I have a plan to maybe do like a sort of short batch of some screen prints of some of these images, just like cool little tank tops or something. I don't know. So I'm not really sure what's next.
And this was a huge output.
Yeah, it was a lot, and I'm not great with all the clerical details of being an artist, and like, oh, because I'm just not. Scanning and like making prints and all of that, like none of that interests me. And I know that's sort of where you can like rise and make money and all of that, but I'm also like a full-time high school art teacher, and so, but I like that stuff feels so joyless to me. So, not really sure what happens next. I mean, I feel like I have like a great cluster of imagery, and there's things that can be done with them, but I don't know what's gonna come. I did have another idea, actually, just the other day, so stay tuned. I just thought of it. Not right now, but the other day. I texted myself the idea, which is what I do when I think of things, because I'll forget them.
So since these look like they're, woodcuts or block prints, you also could photo etch plates of these images.
Yes.
And then print them in a different way which would be, and some of them, I know t-shirts are not your jam, but some of them make great t-shirts.
Yeah, well, that, I'm kind
Like
of
the
thinking
school
that'd
milk
be cool.
program would probably be all over that one.
Which one?
All the milks.
The school
Oh, all the
milk
milks,
program.
yeah.
But anyway, so,
Yeah, I mean, it's like kind of a nice part of being like a high school art teacher is I have access to this like big space, and I can do, you know, stuff in that space. I teach printmaking. So I'm not really sure what's gonna happen next.
Angie?
Yep.
So your titles, do you have them in your head before you start, or do you come up with them after, or probably a mix?
After I just sit
Okay,
there and
after?
rapid fire.
So they're all on the shelf that Jeremy built, and you're just like, oh yeah, night ninja.
Yep. I like naming things. I feel like that's like, it's fun, but I don't like to overthink it. So if I think too long about something, then I'll second guess myself, and then I'll feel like, well, that's dumb, and then I'll roll into all these reasons I shouldn't name it that, and blah, blah, blah. So I just am like, this is funny. I should write it down, and that's what it is. I talk to my students about naming things a lot. It's sort of the, I don't know, the idea behind a good title, so.
How much do you use a sketchbook in your process?
I actually like that it's beside me when I'm working, and I will do like very brief thumbnails to give myself just sort of like some compositional cues. Just like really quick sketches. I mean, they're nothing that would look like or mean anything to anyone but me. And it's a very sloppy sketchbook, but I don't dwell or go into detail necessarily, but yeah, I do have, and it's kind of the way I function is like I've got like 7 sketchbooks, and so then, you know, there's all these pieces everywhere. This is where the organizational stuff doesn't come to me so easily. But it's like, so then in the pile of things I'm pushing around, I'm like, well, these books have things in them. What did I draw in here? And so yeah, I use them. Also to test colors and to see, like, cause I was new to a lot of the colors and see how like the opacity worked. So there were some colors that I wasn't like this one, there was like the way the white sat on top of the brown. That was something that I didn't know until I did it, so it's kind of like just learning as I go.
is there any concern with the alcohol inks with light stability?
Are those Copic markers you're using
Yeah.
over there? I don't think so, because I think Copic's got their formula pretty locked down.
Because some of the regular alcohol inks are so light fugitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just go sepia after, no matter
Yeah.
what color they are.
Yeah, I would, to the best of my knowledge, Copic has put or at least the company that makes Copic has put a lot of effort into figuring out that
That's
formula
what-
and making sure that they're stable.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are definitely things I don't think about.
Which I think is actually, I think that's actually kind of refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
And even just hearing you talk about how, you know, like, well, what's next? I'm not sure. I think, you know, for as many of us who are artists ourselves in the room, or even people who are like have a creative like arc to them, the idea of like having that next thing in the pipeline has, I think, become so. It feels seemingly really important. Like, oh, you have to know what's happening next. I think it's really nice when you can hear like another artist just say, I'm not exactly sure. And I relate that to myself too. After a huge output, I usually need to not make something for a while, go back out and kind of like refill my bucket, and then come back and just dump it all out, and then I make things again. So I like hearing that. I think it's important for people to hear that too.
Yeah, just a little bit of space from it, maybe. I miss the morning joy, because now I'm just sleeping until like 6:15. Like I mean, it's funny, it just happened like that, didn't it, Jeremy? I just like, all of a sudden didn't wake up that early anymore, once the show was up. But yeah, my brain, when it turns on in the morning, if I've got something good going on, it's just, that's all I wanna do. I just can like hyper-focus and just go right to that thing, so that was like this whole show.
Yeah.
I can't function until the second cup of coffee.
Well, I was making like really bad coffee and like heating up with yesterday's coffee while doing that at 4 in the morning. Yeah, I'm a morning person. Like, find me at like 2 o'clock and I'd love a nap. But I'm definitely like, my creative, like, thinking part of me is morning. I can feel it wane as the school day goes on, so.
I think, Mike, when you just said, wow, that's what a lot of people say when they come in and they kind of take in the show for a minute. And when they recognize, like when they look down and see like acrylic marker or watercolor, people go, whoa. Like, like it's just a natural reaction to looking at this show. And yeah, and Angie, I think, if there are any other questions?
Do you have a favorite?
I took a field trip with my AP class down here in December, and that was one of the questions they asked me, and now I'm like, I don't remember what I said. I feel like, I think that my answer was the poncho one, the one with the leg, but probably just because I love that guy so much. I don't know. I don't really know that I have a favorite.
Rising does it for me. The octopus.
Yeah, that one's good.
The one with the finger puppet brought me back to a thing I haven't thought of in about 30 years.
The finger puppet?
Yeah.
We put them on our Christmas tree. It's like our Christmas tree topper.
Yeah.
That's where he came from.
I have great memories of, just putting all of them on my fingers and just putting them out. And I was like, oh my god, I haven't thought about that in decades. And
Yeah.
The really bad rubber ones, right?
Yeah,
That's what that guy is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like there's a few that are like observational. That one was one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever have, do you ever have a problem knowing when you're done? Like, for example, like you could add in more, or did you add in enough, or like some of these are completely filled out to the edge almost, and some of them are a little more like, there's one thing you didn't need to do anymore. Do you ever have issue with that? Like, not knowing when you're done or feeling done, or is it very clear?
That's a good question. I think sometimes, and I don't know who would ask this question, if I knew exactly what was gonna happen, but the one thing I feel like I always know is gonna happen is the space I'm gonna consume. So like, going into like this one, and this is where I'll do a little bit of planning, I'll measure so far in, so I know I'm kind of staying like within that space, and I know I wanna fill it.
Yeah.
And then this one, I knew I wanted like the negative space. So it's almost like I can feel how much space needs to be filled, and then it's just done when it's filled.
Yeah.
But compositionally, that's something that I feel pretty like I can't see the whole image, but I know how it's gonna be composed and how much is gonna be like white and how much is gonna be color. Like I can kind of like visually feel that, and then just kind of fill until I get to that point, I guess. Yeah. And then I started to, because it was a show of many, think about the relatability of like this one and like that one and the sloth all have like a similar composition. So I'm like, all right, well like a couple clusters of 3 of some of those, and like the ones of like the grid, like I didn't want just like a one-off, I wanted a couple that like had that feel, because the subject was so different. Some synergy between some of the different choices I made was important to me. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Angie, before we close,
Yeah.
I want to just kind of express like what I think the most important aspect of this show was, and I have it in the exhibition copy here. Says we spend a good deal of our time imagining places we want to visit, people we want to become, and things we wish we had or could let go of. Imagination is a powerful tool that each of us possess. As children, we couldn't help but imagine, but as our minds grew faster than our surroundings, blinked twice, and now we're adults, and the world feels too big and heavy. I think what makes this show so much fun and so important is that you are an adult, like you are a teacher, you're an educator, and you're an artist, and you're making work that is fun, work that is playful, but there's a level of seriousness to that play and that exploration and the fun that I think resonates with people who come in and take in the show. And then I think probably one of the most exciting thing for me is like watching children connect with the work. And there was a young boy who was looking at Rising, and he turned to me and he goes, "How cool would it be is if you were on an island that actually turned out to be a giant octopus. But then he's like, but also, what if the sun coming up over the ocean was just the head of that octopus? And like he was like really getting into it, and I really appreciate that, you know, that you guys for a moment found a really strong common ground through an image. You know, him being so young and you being so experienced, it's just great that you can find that moment when you can connect. And I think a lot of people lose that over time, and if anything, I want this show to encourage you to like go out and imagine something nonsensical or crazy or bizarre and try to draw it. So, yeah, thank you.